which actor most squandered an otherwise promising career? Jennifer Grey, Dirty Dancing, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, was sensitive about her large nose because of her school years and early acting career. With Dirty Dancing being a hit, she finally had the money to get herself rhinoplasty. Unfortunately, Hollywood disagreed and felt she lost her distinctive look. She was deemed too plain for the big screen and couldn't build off her success. She continued working but didn't get to have a career as leading lady. Lea Michele, the lead in the Funny Girl revival, was hers for the taking, but she spent her entire career being mean and difficult to work with, and now, shocker, no one wants to work with her. With her talent, she should have taken Broadway by storm and scored the lead in a hit movie musical or two. And this isn't about her being more or less talented than anyone else in the Glee cast, but her voice and acting style were made for musical theater. I blame Ryan Murphy for creating her. Literally everyone always talks about how he favored her so heavily and protected her so much on Glee and would always bend to her every will. He literally raised her to be a spoiled brat. You know, it's bad when not one of her co-stars can say a good thing about her and when they all refuse to work with Ryan again basically. Lilo Brancato, he broke out in A Bronx Tale, was a good supporting character in Crimson Tide, and had a recurring role in The Sopranos. He became addicted to heroin and was involved in a home invasion robbery where his accomplice murdered the off-duty police officer living there. Promising career right down the toilet like in Trainspotting. De Niro and Chaz Palminteri stopped talking to him because they tried to help him, but he just wouldn't change. Saw a bunch of members from the Bronx Tale cast at an Italian street festival having a discussion about the film. Lilo looked like he was in healthy and in good shape. Jane looks like she hasn't aged a day. Mario is still a fucking psycho. Didn't they just write Ehrlich off with Gavin leaving him in an opium den in China? What a way to go. But yeah, definite bitterness with the producers. Stars and him. They interviewed producer Alec Berg after the finale and he just flatly responded no if they thought of bringing TJ Miller back for it. Sean Young is hard to figure out. She might be completely batshit crazy or she might be just an oddball actor who keeps getting screwed around by Hollywood. She is one of Harvey Weinstein's victims. Victim of what, precisely? We don't know. Notorious womanizer James Wood sued her for harassment for behavior that occurred while they were working together on The Boost. He says she left a disfigured doll on his doorstep. She says she didn't, and it was just a crush that didn't pan out, and the lawsuit was spiteful. The lawsuit was settled out of court and Young was awarded a couple $100,000 in legal costs. So who knows what the hell actually happened there, but you don't usually pay legal costs to someone unless the lawsuit was frivolous. She was the original Vicky Vale in Batman until she broke her arm in a horseback riding accident unrelated to the film. Then she was the original Tess Trueheart in Dick Tracy until Warren Beatty decided that she didn't look maternal enough. So, when the Catwoman role became available for Batman Returns, because Annette Bening found out she was pregnant, she lobbied hard for it. The general consensus is that she went too far, but, if she'd ended up getting the part, then she would have gone just far enough. Hindsight is a bitch. She gambled her career and lost. At the time, I bought into the whole crazy actress thing that the tabloids were pushing, but, looking back, I kind of think, hey, go big or go home. And she has a couple more incidents that happened later that, like the James Woods thing, turned out to be non-incidents. She's definitely a weird person, but then so is Gwyneth Paltrow. So being weird isn't a crime in Hollywood. You just have to be weird and successful, and the last part isn't always in your hands. I remember when that happened. He was the star of a hit show and it happened on set. I'm working on an essay about him right now. He would have been a Schwarzenegger or a Stallone but died early. He was an organ donor, which wasn't as common back then, and his mom gave everything possible away to help as many people as she could. She didn't want his death to be meaningless. I hadn't heard anything about him, so I just googled it and holy shit, acting on BDSM/rap/cannibalism fantasies without his partner's consent. No wonder he got dropped from everything. Edit: I tweaked the phrasing to make it clearer that all of the things I listed were non-consensual. If you've got any of the kinks above, I'm not trying to yuck your yum. I'm just highlighting the seriousness of acting on said kinks without the full and enthusiastic consent of all parties involved. I used to love Boy Meets World, and based off interviews they did after the show they all thought they would be big, but none of them got any work for a while. I think they're all working now in various fields, but I'm surprised they didn't immediately shoot up in popularity once the show ended. I heard an interview with Danielle Fisher where she basically said that at the time the show ended, she had a big ego and thought she was too good for daytime soaps, but no one else wanted to hire her. I'm paraphrasing something I read years ago, so don't quote me. He was being snubbed screen time on his show. He was pouting and wanted attention. Probably went on a little bender, so he got high and came up with this plan to get some sympathy points. The plan went Coen Brothers level bad, and he ended up being one of the biggest laughingstocks of recent memory. Loki shocked how far I had to scroll for this. She was on top of the world for a minute there, and she crumbled under the media pressure since she didn't have any support system. So sad. What kills me though is people have given her chances to make a comeback, with various movies and her own reality show, even though she was virtually uninsurable at that point. And she wasn't able to take advantage of that. It seems like she's still not been able to find any stability, which makes it even worse. Nerdstalgic did a video on this recently. https://f.b/y0l_pow57hq. Long story short, he was paid a lot for Iron Man 1, and in the end they had to cut a lot of it down, or even out completely, as they weren't happy with his performance. So when they get around to Iron Man 2, they weren't willing to give him as much money. Terrence Howard wasn't willing to take the pay cut, so in the end they had to drop him and the MCU had to recast. I was far too young in the 80s to really know much about Corey Haim's accusations until about 3 or 4 years ago, but after Weinstein went down it's looking like he was telling the truth the entire time. My heart breaks for him, not because I have any great attachment to him as an actor. I can't think of a single film he's done that I've seen in my life, but to have to endure that and spend decades trying to tell people the truth and to have everyone just say, "Oh, you're crazy," I can't imagine how he copes with it. I don't think the drugs are enough to erase that pain, even temporarily. Edit to correct. I meant Corey Feldman, not Corey Haim. I mean, the defining trait of the character they had her playing was her bringing up rape gangs every fucking episode. I don't blame her for bailing. Her character was written terribly, and as much as I absolutely adore TNG, I fully admit that the writing of female characters on the show was just awful. Be it Troy crying over her space rape baby whom she'd just given birth to, then immediately getting over it, to Dr. Crusher and the Trill. Yeah, not great. I mean, given the situation at Star Trek at the time, I can't judge her for jumping ship. There was really no way to see where things were going to turn out in the future. And there were still problems afterwards, even if the quality of the show improved. I don't know what her career plans were afterwards, so I can't play keyboard quarterback on that, but the impression that I got was she was going for movies when she probably should have been in more TV. I could picture her on LA Law or various things like that. Denise Crosby playing Lieutenant Tasha Yar on Star Trek, TNG, and jumping ship, pun intended, just before it got really big. Point of order on this one, Crosby leaving the show makes a lot more sense in context. The first 2 seasons of TNG are god-awful. The costumes were reportedly torturously uncomfortable. Roddenberry was apparently an over-controlling nightmare. The scripts were fucking awful. Nobody thought the show would go much farther. In fact, the legendary 2-parter Best of Both Worlds, which comprises the S3 finale and the S4 premiere, was left deliberately open-ended as to whether or not Picard would survive because Patrick Stewart's contract was up and there was a real possibility he might not re-sign. Crosby was, by her own account, completely miserable. She hated her character. Yar didn't get any real character development and it didn't seem likely that she would. She hated the show. She just wanted to be over and fucking done with it all. When you consider that one of the Yar-centered episodes was one of the most jaw-droppingly racist things ever to happen on track, her decision to finally fucking leave the show feels pretty justified. Also important to note, she's the granddaughter of Bing Crosby and is independently wealthy. She didn't really need the money. I can't believe nobody has mentioned Mickey Rourke. He was the leading man in a number of successful movies in the 80s, then left Hollywood to become a boxer. His boxing career did so much damage to his face that he required reconstructive surgery. He did return to acting, but his career never returned to anything close to the meteoric rise it had before. Yeah, drugs really messed him up. But he's doing alright. He even sings and he's pretty good. https://www.youtube.com/watch V=CJD609P9Z. I loved his work in A Different World in the early 90s. He was one of those sometimes antagonist-protagonist type characters, where he comes off as a douche, but he has more depth. Great character overall and well acted. To be fair, when they made a documentary about this, Becoming Bond, I believe, it turned out there were a lot of unreasonable things in the contract that Ian asked George Lazenby to sign. They wanted him to live his entire life, both on and off screen, in a manner that fit the image of James Bond. That would have meant 5 years of needing to dress, shave, eat and drink like 007, even on his days off. He let his beard grow a bit during the press tour for the one movie he did, because beards were in at the time, and the studio pitched a fit. He would have shaved in time to start shooting the next one, but they were angry anyway. Bond doesn't wear a beard, so Lazenby can't have one either. Plus On Her Majesty's Secret Service was his first paid acting job, ever, so he hadn't come up in the industry. He wasn't used to those kinds of expectations. I wouldn't have signed a lifestyle contract under those circumstances, and it's not too surprising he didn't want to, either. So, he went and did something else with his life. He was a competitive BMX biker. He raised a family. He's actually pretty rich now from various real estate investments. I understand, it's not Hollywood's vision of success, but there's something to be said for it. Corey Haim, teen heartthrob, funny, charming, in a lot of great flicks, then gone. Same sad child actor story of abuse followed by drug addiction. Shortly before he died he was on a reality show, The Two Coreys, with Feldman that really gave some insight into where he has gone. I remember watching it and really rooting for him, hoping he could somehow get it together and have a comeback. Then he passed of a myriad of complications all rooted in his drug abuse. When Feldman is the responsible one, you know you're off the rails. For my older Redditors, Shannon Doherty from Beverly Hills 90210. Her attitude got her tossed from that show. Her fights with Jenny Garth were famous. Then she got onto Charmed and the same thing happened with Alyssa Milano. And her career pretty much dropped after that because she was considered a bitch and too difficult to work with. Now, sadly, she has stage 4 terminal breast cancer. Although she claims she feels she has 10-15 more years to live, the fact is that she doesn't. When it spreads she'll have months. Preemptive RIP for Bem. It's a really sad story to have watched transpire. I remember as a kid, watching that scene where he slaps the shit out of his dad when he's on the toilet to fuck with him. I definitely laughed my ass off because I was a kid. But I also had this lingering sense of something not being okay, kind of like how when you get to do bad stuff as a kid and afterwards you feel like, well, that was cool getting away with it, but this isn't gonna stay this way sort of feeling. Charlie Sheen could have been one of the greats. Went from Platoon in 1986 to Wall Street in 1987 and then shooting his fiancée and future wife of John Travolta, Kelly Preston, in the arm accidentally by 1990, and then a series of ups and downs before we all saw the unraveling into Tiger Blood and winning 2 decades later. Faye Dunaway was set to become Hollywood royalty with Bonnie and Clyde, Chinatown, and network under her belt, but by the late 70s, her on-set behavior became the stuff of legend. She got branded with the cursed difficult label. Then Mommy Dearest came out and that was pretty much it. Then Bette Davis came out against her and that was pretty much it for her in leading roles in film. She had to start doing television, and many bit parts and guest appearances, a true fall from her former glory. I was born in '90, so I wasn't aware of his legal issues, nor had I really heard of him before the Iron Man movie. But I remember my parents being really surprised to see him in big action movie, even if it was a superhero movie, and it was one of the few times they were interested in watching that kind of movie. I'm really glad he got his life figured out because he is a phenomenal actor. What gets me most about Mike Richards is that the guy already had an incredibly successful TV career. Game show production is notoriously competitive and cutthroat, and by all accounts he was not bad at it. He'd worked as executive producer on Price is Right, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Wheel of Fortune, all before he ever got the executive producership of Jeopardy! Pulled down an easy $6 million career total and was set to make far more. But, no, he was convinced he needed to be in front of the camera. The one thing that, by audience consensus, he did not have a great talent for. And now he's lost both the presenting gig and a very successful TV production career, through self-sabotage. I feel like his downfall was growing up. Not that he shouldn't have pursued more, but that film school pretentious attitude between projects. If he wasn't famous he might have grown out of it and we'd see some great stuff. Because he was famous he had extra eyes watching when he made dumb kid decisions, like fighting with 4chan. And that's what killed him. Hayden Panettiere, she had such a great youth in acting, and started looking like she was destined to be one of the next hot sexy it girls. But it seems Hayden has quite a few demons she's dealt with over the years. If you ever get bored, there is a rabbit hole of blind items about her upbringing and how it's basically implied that she was whored out to many power players in Hollywood by her own parents, knowing full well what was going on because her father also had sexually abused her, allegedly. Then a few years ago, after she divorced that Russian boxer, she got involved with a piece of crap dude who routinely used to beat the crap out of her, to the point he went to jail for it and she got a restraining order. And then she went on to supposedly have sex with the dude's dad and brother. Oh, but now that he's out of jail and no longer under the restraining order, she's back with him. I'm sure it will end well. Sad, but she seems like a very damaged girl. Lol, I'm from Long Island and was at a bar on my 38th day. Mama Lowen came in with 2-3 friends that you could tell were just her yes girls. They looked shell-shocked and hardly spoke. Anyway, long story short, Miss Lowen started treating the staff and surrounding patrons in a very packed bar like shit and pulled the "don't you know who my daughter is" bullshit whenever there was an attempt to put her in check. The owner wound up throwing her out with her kicking and screaming empty threats while her friends carried any of her belongings she dropped while dropping her daughter's name closely behind her. I'm 51 now and it was still one of the funniest days I ever had. Lol. Edit. Hey, thanks so much for the award. That's so rad, didn't expect that. Even though he is financially very successful, I'd say Johnny Depp has squandered his artistic potential by allowing himself to be eternally typecast as some variation of Hunter S. Thompson, Jack Sparrow, to the point where he can't even knock that shit off in private. He used to be someone that could have pulled off any role. Now he's just doing a shtick. I think it would have done him wonders to do a few art house movies in between, something with a director that would challenge him as an actor. Yep, she has always been a background actress, which is totally fine. I don't think her career changed much, it's just that one of her B-movie roles gained way too much notoriety because of its rating. Content. Nobody would have even heard about Showgirls if it wasn't directed by the guy who just did RoboCop, Total Recall, and Basic Instinct. Come to think of it, Paul Verhoeven would be a good answer to the director version of this post. There are a ton of actors who similarly make terrible movies in between small roles on TV shows.